Well, greetings, everyone. Today is November 17th, 2022. Welcome to your Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. This is a special session. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that we have individuals attending remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should mute their phones, please, when not speaking to avoid background noise. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak so the public that is participating knows who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and current guidance from the Kansas Attorney General's office. I will now call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to announce the meeting and conduct the roll call.
Mayor Garner, thank you. Good evening, everyone. You are hereby notified that I've called a special session with the Unified Government of Wyandotte County in Kansas City, Kansas to be conducted in a hybrid format on Thursday, November 17, 2022 at 5 p.m. in the 5th floor conference room of the Municipal Office Building, 701 North 7th Street, Kansas City, Kansas, for a joint session with legislative delegates and the commission. Roll call. Stites. Here. Davis. Bynum.
Here.
Burrows.
Here.
Commissioner Townsend has an absence memo. McKiernan.
Here.
Ramirez.
Here.
Johnson. Kane. Markley.
Here.
Garner.
Here. Thank you, clerk. Tonight is a joint session with our legislative delegation to include some new members, and congratulations to them. This is about the upcoming session and items of importance that we know is of the utmost importance to the unified government and everybody in Wyandotte County. So I'd like to welcome all the members of the Wyandotte County State Delegation who have joined us this evening. We know that there's more coming along that will be joining us shortly. We're very pleased to have you and that you've taken the time to meet with our commission, and we are looking forward to sustaining this relationship moving forward as we move into the legislative session in 2023. As we all know, what happens in Topeka can have a big impact on Wyandotte County. In the discussion tonight, we'll value your input from the legislative delegation, what needs to be included, what we need to modify, and perhaps what battles need to be left for another day. We are joined today by Mr. Paul Davis, who many of you know. Paul is our lobbyist in Topeka and is a strong advocate for both the interests of the unified government and anybody that calls Wyandotte County home. We hope you will utilize his expertise and his experience and insight as we move forward in this coming session. Before I turn it over to our Assistant Administrator, Mr. Alan House, who's going to walk you through the draft agenda, I'd like to ask each member of the delegation to introduce themselves and the districts they represent. We have a lot of new faces in Wyandotte County as far as the delegation is concerned, and I think it'd be great if we start this off by just making ourselves acquainted. So if we could start on this end.
There we go. Thank you. Hi, and thank you for having us. I'm Representative Pam Curtis. I represent the 32nd District, which is downtown Kansas City, Kansas, and the surrounding neighborhoods. It grew a little bit. It almost mirrors Commissioner McKiernan's district. It really did before redistricting. So I lost the Armourdale portion of my district, and I gained from 18th Street to 635. So now my boundaries are State Avenue, the river, I-70, and 635. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Lynn Melton, and I'm newly elected, replacing Kathy Wolf Moore for District 36. And my district runs south of Hollingsworth, north of Parallel, little bitty piece of 55th to 72nd Street, and then 72nd Street to 7 Highway. So at this point, I'm just drinking it all in.
Good evening. Representative Valdina Nguyen, 34th District, runs from 5th, essentially 75th state to Georgia, and very interested in listening to the priorities and seeing how we can help. Thank you.
I'm Mike Thompson. Thank you for the invite tonight. Newly elected, District 33 includes Turner, Muncie, Morris, Edwardsville, and then Bonner Springs. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all. And again, congratulations. Oh, I'm
There's a
sorry.
senator
Got
here.
Senator.
There's one of us in the House. Senator Pat Petty, I represent the 6th district. And so the district goes from 7th Street all the way out to 110th. Actually, if you get over to Parallel. And then so it's changed just a very little. And all of the south side. And I could go through the communities, Argentine, Rosedale, Armourdale, Turner, that's where I live in Turner, Muncie, portion of Edwardsville, in town, all around Ward High School. And so there's, as I say, it's a lot of Wyandotte County and a small portion of Johnson County. So I'm sure that, and we have Senator Pittman has another portion, has a small portion of Wyandotte County in his district, and then Senator Haley has the rest of Wyandotte County. So we're happy to be representing us.
Thank you. Did I miss anybody? Okay. And I believe, Senator, you were a commissioner as well at one point, right?
Yes, I was a commissioner, District 6 as well.
Okay, so, yes.
And we do still have another member of our caucus, Representative Tom Burrows, until his replacement is sworn in. So
Yes. Thank you. And I was just getting ready to get to that, because we would all be remiss if we didn't recognize Representative Tom Burrows. He did not run against this year. He decided obviously not to seek that reelection opportunity, but he continues to serve Wyandotte County as a unified government commissioner in the Alaris 2nd district. And I believe he still remain the dean of the Wyandotte County delegation for a few more weeks. I think that's, if I'm accurate.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe that honor belongs to Senator Haley, that is fourth most senior member in the entire legislature, and that comes with opportunities for our community when that seniority is gained. And so, to my senior members that are moving up in seniority, remember home. That's what got you where you are, and that's where you'll come when it's over. So, but it's been my honor and privilege to serve not only the community, but to serve with my colleagues. And I wish Mr. Thompson the very best in your endeavors. And Wyandotte County is our home, and that inclusive of Bonner Springs and Edwardsville. Yeah. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Representative Commissioner Burrows. Let's give him a round of applause for years of service. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the acting county administrator, Mr. Allen House, and he's going to take the meeting from here.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, commissioners and members of the delegation. Allen House, Assistant County Administrator. As a reminder, as we get into this conversation tonight, that the legislative agenda will come back before the UG Commission on December 1st for approval. So our discussion here tonight is really to kind of flesh that out in more detail, and as the mayor said, to kind of get your feedback. And we hope that this will really help you prioritize as you all go into the session next year about what the priorities are of the UG Commission. And we do in this development this year's agenda try to reflect feedback we'd received from the delegation about trying to tighten up the legislative agenda and make sure that it was really focused on what those priorities were. Yeah, we have all right. So in this agenda, it's composed a little bit differently than commissioners would have seen in years past, in both that it has a set of potential priorities, what those, in this case, 13 items, but really trying to maybe get that down to a top 10 that would be priorities from the UG Commission for their legislative agenda. There's 39 items in total. There's 13 that are identified as priority items. And we'll walk through those. So if you're looking at the Word document there for the PowerPoint. Um, and the other thing that is different about this year is that in years past, portions of the League of Kansas Municipalities agenda was taken out and put into the UG legislative agenda. And I think members of the delegation found that sort of duplicative and sometimes confusing in it, and it elongated the agenda. So with the exception of 2 items that are related to star bonds, because those are so specific to Wyandotte County, everything else that is in the League of Kansas Municipalities agenda is sitting within their document and is not in the UG agenda. So we're trying to keep it really as focused as we can on Wyandotte County this year. We'll see if we succeeded in that effort. So in the process of developing this, we did survey UG departments to make sure that we were getting input from departments about those legislative priorities, and then working with Mr. Davis to identify which items we thought would be sort of most likely to be advanceable in this year in the legislative session. There are items that are carried over from the 22 agenda, as well as a number of new items. We also sort of tried in this document to identify items, whether they were legislation or whether they were appropriation, and recognizing that, sort of maybe that may make a difference in terms of how the delegation approaches trying to get traction on those issues. And then we group them according to 4 areas: economic and community development, local government operations, public health and human services, public safety, and tax and finance. So I thought for the purposes of this conversation, we can run through all the items in sort of in brief there. And then if there are clarifying questions, we do have staff available that can answer specific questions on items. And then if there are items that the commission or the delegation wants to suggest be added to this or removed from it, have that discussion, and then leave some time for the priorities discussion as well to really kind of see if we can hone in on what those top priorities are of the commission for this legislative agenda, with the goal being to adjourn by 6:30 this evening. So that's our target ahead of the 7 o'clock commission meeting, and so that there's an opportunity for folks to eat before the meeting as well. So with that kind of overview, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Davis, who's going to give us a brief overview as well on Topeka.
Thank you, and good to see all of you. And I think this is really a unique opportunity for some good dialogue about what the UG's priorities ought to be in the 2023 session. All of you, except for Senator Petty, are fresh off the campaign trail, and you've been talking to lots and lots of your constituents, and probably have the pulse of your districts as well as anybody. And so I think you've been hearing on the doorstep about what people are interested in and want to see from the state legislature. And so I hope you'll express those opinions here, because I think they're definitely very relevant. I don't want to get too much into the election results, because I think everybody knows what happened, and they're glad the elections are over. You can now safely turn on your television and not have to see the mudslinging TV ads, which no matter where you are on the political spectrum, I think everybody agrees that they're relieved when that happens. But one thing that a comment that was made to me by somebody that I think is kind of relevant is there's always change with every election. But actually, if you look at Topeka now versus what it's going to look like when you convene on the 9th of January, it's going to be pretty similar. Things have not changed a great deal. The same governor is going to be there. A couple of different statewide office holders, but the composition of the legislature is largely going to be pretty much the same as it has been before. When you have a gubernatorial election, I think, as everybody knows, the governor more than anybody else sets the agenda of what's going to happen, and they prepare the budget. I think probably the attribute of the governor's office that has really the most power is the preparation of and submission of the budget. They really set the baseline for what's going to be considered budget wise, and you oftentimes don't know what exactly is coming down the pike. Governor Kelly talked about a lot of things on the campaign trail. And so we know what some of those things are going to be. For instance, moving up the elimination of the food sales tax is on her agenda and definitely will be proposed. But there are probably a lot of other priorities that we're yet to hear about. And maybe some of you have some insight on some of those from discussions that you've had with the administration. We've Alan and I have worked together to try to pare down. I think he may have mentioned we had about 100 items on this list originally after all of the departments were surveyed, and we tried to pare that down. If any of you get complaints from people in the departments about their specific items not getting on the list, you can defer blame to Alan and I for taking some of those items off. And we tried to list some of those priority items, but I think really, hopefully through this discussion, there may be some changes to what you see as priorities. And so I just look forward to discussion and here as a resource to answer any questions or any insight that I can offer. So Alan, I'll send it back to you. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Davis. I'd ask if the clerk could bring up the presentation, this item. So while that's coming up, so there are several documents at your seat there. There's this brightly colored one, League of Kansas Municipalities document. This is the one that the league puts out, and I'll note that the mayor is on the executive board of the League of Kansas Municipalities, and this is something that the league puts out every year, which is a statement of priorities across a bunch of different municipalities. So there's a lot of common ground in here with other cities. And again, with the exception of 2 items related to star bonds, this agenda stands on its own and is not included in the UG legislative agenda. But I wanted you all to have it so you can see what is in the league agenda. And if the commission so decides, they could endorse the league agenda or kind of just let it ride. What you also have then is this Word document, which you received ahead of time. And this was, I think Mr. Davis sent this out to the delegation on Tuesday. So hopefully you had a chance to look through it. And this is the 39 items now that are the kind of the meat of the draft proposed legislative agenda. So moving to here, I got the clicker. Ooh, and a new clicker. So as I mentioned, staff working with Mr. Davis kind of took a swing at what these top potential priority areas could be. And this is from listening to the discussion amongst the commission and what is in other kind of bodies of work within the UG. And so, this is the initial list that we came up with. And again, if we can go through this, go through these, and then kind of come back around towards the backside of the discussion and see whether there are changes to these priorities that would be recommended for the legislative agenda. So starting with the first one, food sales tax. Obviously, we just heard about this and the elimination of that, and then the challenge specific to the star bond districts and making sure, since our star bond district relies in part on that sales tax, that doesn't get cut away in a way that leaves that sales tax district more vulnerable. Maybe pause there and see if there's any questions on that one.
I've heard
I think it's significant. The impact star bonds have had for Wyandotte County is extremely important that we keep that momentum going. And I think it's only been reinstated for 3, quite possibly for review, no more than 5. So be mindful, there's a very short window. and there'll be requests to change it. Just be mindful that every little change can have a dynamic effect on what we've accomplished here and what we can accomplish with Star Bonds moving forward. And those of us who have been around Star Bonds long enough to know that there's a lot of people out there that want Star Bonds to meet their project, but don't want the project to meet the criteria of Star Bonds. So I think we've been very fortunate to be able to utilize Star Bonds. We're held out as an example of how they work. And I would just encourage us to be mindful that that is something that has been very important to this community.
All right. And I say too that these are numbered, but they're not numbered in any attempt at, what is number one, what is number two. They're just numbered so that we can refer to them. So in that prioritization process, we can come back. And if you all have strong thoughts about the ranking of those, we can incorporate that. But didn't want you to see this and be like, that number one is the very most important. Anyway, number two, expanded development financing tools.
Well, I don't want to leave out saying
Yeah.
that food sales tax, definitely, I'm glad to see it as number one. It's going to be one of the number one things on the governor's state of the state agenda. And that doesn't mean that the legislature is going to embrace that movement, although I'm sure that every legislator that's running for office heard that at the door about, food costs have gone up. So I would say definitely it should be at the top of the Wyandotte County agenda to see that, because that our citizens would all benefit from that.
All right, the second one here, expanded development financing tools. And this is one that kind of an extension of the second story legislation that Representative Curtis worked through last year and would expand the set of financing tools that are available. So that are now available to rural counties would be available to Wyandotte County as well. Representative Curtis, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yes, so the city of Topeka, what they did last year on that same piece of legislation was they added that this whole city of Topeka would be eligible for RHID, which then made them eligible for all of those rural incentives for housing. So we should consider that for KCK. But then I also, just in thinking about it, like we should insert every time we're talking about incentives that are specific for rural communities, we should insert rural communities and economically distressed urban areas. Like we should insert that in everything that comes across. Like every time we see that, like every time we see is specific to rural and economically distressed urban areas, because we all share a lot of the same challenges, even though our approaches might be a little bit different. There's no reason to, separate us geographically that way. So we should help the most challenged areas in our state. So yes, definitely, I support that, and we'll continue to work on it as much as I can.
Thank you. What are like a couple examples of what are those rural incentive programs that are that we don't have that ability to get to? I'm just curious.
Well, one that I would be particularly interested in was the pot of money that was set aside for pretty much workforce housing. So the jobs that we are creating in the state that make, between $60,000 and $80,000, what kind of house can that person or that family afford? And so that's the kind of housing that we need to be building. And so we know that there's a gap in that. So the rural communities now have a pot of money that they can access that will help them. The other thing that I think would be helpful for our community is that when we did all of our demo, we didn't do it anticipating that that lot was going to be developed on at some time in the future. So right away, when we have somebody, particularly on land bank property, when we have somebody who wants to develop that, right away, their first costs are doing all of the remedial stuff, all of the environmental cleanup. So if there would be a way to access, one of those pots of money that has that flexibility to address that, then maybe we could be building more affordable housing or helping with that. So those would be a couple of examples.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. Anybody else? Commission? Okay. So moving to number 3 here, childcare and pre-K expansion. This is a new item that has not previously been on the agenda and it's really kind of emerged from the economic development perspective and been a focus both of the community health improvement plan and WYDEC have spoken extensively about the need for this and the barrier that it creates for job creation and families.
I'll just say, you already know we're in a desperate situation here in Wyandotte County when it comes to childcare availability and affordability. There is a group, I'm serving on it, as well as Commissioner Davis. It's Raising Wyandotte, and we have a grant to proceed with planning strategies for how do we address that. So this is a great item to have on here because this is not just a critical need in Wyandotte County, although we probably are, of the larger counties, we're probably in the worst shape of all when it comes to childcare affordability and availability. But it's statewide. So it certainly is an issue that we need to be, or we need to work on and you need to be supportive of.
But could I just add to that? Last year we did pass the business tax credit, childcare tax credit, which does allow businesses now to have a tax credit if they are providing childcare for their employees. So that would be something I've been asking at the recent briefings that we've been on. Does anybody have an example of a business that has taken advantage of that tax credit? Because that would be very helpful if we know that that is an incentive that is working, to be able to, expand upon that or at least address that when we go back to session. But I'm not really sure, and this happens a lot of times. We will pass legislation and there it sits, but it really takes somebody else then to take it the one step further. That was kind of like with the upper story. I think there was maybe some enabling stuff that you have to do to allow that to happen. So it's like that with the business childcare tax credit. It's like, who's responsible for going out and marketing this? So all the businesses, that we have in our community, we should figure out some way to get that information to them. So maybe this is something that they could take advantage of.
Yeah, I would agree because that's been available to large corporations, but not to small businesses. And now it's available to any size business to either provide their own or to contract with. And it's a 50% tax credit. So it's a great incentive, but you have to have the workforce as well, the childcare workforce, in order to contract with them. That's the other important piece.
And I'd like to add that Representative Curtis and I also serve on a working group on that same topic. So we will.
We're on the same one. We're actually all on the same one.
Yeah, that's what I said. We likely have to want to continue this conversation because there are things that the local government can facilitate this initiative. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Number 4, Medicaid expansion. I don't want to skip right over this, but I think people are fairly familiar with it. Well-trod ground, but it is certainly a priority and tremendous benefit opportunities for Wyandotte County.
Another economic development tool that our citizens need so much, and it's going to be on the governor has always supported Medicaid expansion, and she will be pushing, and it'll be interstate to state again this year.
Number 5, this is foster care support after the age of 18. So this is the issue of children that age out of foster care kind of have a steep cliff where they hit 18 and then there's not supports underneath of them. And so there's a risk that that they have in terms of showing up in the criminal justice system and other risk factors. So this is really thinking about, are there ways, and I think other states have started to look at this as well, to provide supports for children who age out of foster care, so that they have a better shot and a stronger start as they go into adulthood. Number 6, drug paraphernalia definitions. And this kind of has two flavors on this. This is related to sort of both marijuana and the definition of paraphernalia under state statute that can allow for charges on the possession of paraphernalia around marijuana. So that's part, and then the other part is around that it's not legal to have needles and syringes in Kansas. And so any sort of needle exchange programs or anything like that begins to try and address harm reduction with regards to the opioid epidemic are not permissible under current state law. So this is really kind of two of those that fall into that drug paraphernalia definition piece that have been recommended for this agenda, and it really come through our conversations with the health department as well as with our other public safety agencies. Number 7, substance abuse treatment. This is again kind of related to the opioid epidemic and expanded state funding for inpatient and outpatient treatment facilities in Wyandotte County. We've seen the increase in overdose and deaths associated with that. And we've also seen now that there are some of the changes that Wyandotte County is losing its major inpatient facility with the closing of Mirror Inc. At the end of this month. So there's both an increasing need and a decreasing supply within Wyandotte County of inpatient substance abuse treatment centers. So that's where this item comes from. Number 8, clean slate automated expungement. This was on the agenda last year, and this is related to the automated expungement of qualifying criminal records from public view, as opposed to going through the process of petitioning to the court for that.
Fingers crossed we have success this year. This is something that we've now introduced for the last 3 years. It started with our Healthy Communities Wyandotte. It was their initiative. I kind of helped champion it, but it really became the House Judiciary's committee work. And so almost everybody on that committee is very passionate about trying to get this bill through. It went through the Judicial Council. It's scaled way back from what our coalition would really like to see. However, it gets the ball rolling. It puts a process in place that then would be easily expanded to other expungements. So fingers crossed this year we get it across the finish line. We got it out of committee, full support. I really don't think there will be much objection in the House, but then we'll have to work with the Senate, and you never know what's going to happen there. But thank you.
I might just add to that. One of the impediments has been the opposition of the County and District Attorneys Association, and due to a lot of Representative Curtis's work, they are no longer taking that position, and that's going to help significantly.
In fact, they even appointed a member to be a member of our committee, so they're meeting with us on a monthly basis. So, yeah, we won them over.
All right, number 9, mental health in jails. So this is really related to full state funding for mental health services, including additional bed space. This also has to do with the waiting list now at the state facilities related to the criminal justice system. And that wait time then translates directly into dollar costs for Wyandotte County in terms of people staying in Wyandotte County Jail that should be getting evaluated and or treated at state facilities. So there's both a need for this from a treatment perspective as well as from a cost perspective.
Alan, just a comment that I've been thinking about over the last few days, and I think it pertains. When we had a homeless camp set up near a neighborhood where they have requested the police assist with basically it was on private property where the police assist with a trespass warrant. So I'm assuming those 1 or 2 or 3, however many people are there, are going to jail. You may know better than me, but you know, where else will you go? And then just yesterday, I was telling Commissioner Burrows about a gentleman who had appeared to set up his spot couple miles from where I live, and it was just a really odd spot. And then on my way, right after we talked about that, on my way home, I turned the corner and there's the 2 police officers dealing with him. And once again, I thought he's headed for jail because where else will he go? And so, I mean, sadly, we just don't have the resources. But I just, you know, I'm sure that many of our folks who are homeless are also dealing with mental health or substance abuse or both. And so when we talk about this item, I just think the increase that we are all seeing with our own eyes of houseless individuals in the community are exacerbating this issue that was already a pretty serious issue before the pandemic. So.
So I think it's important to point out that just because you are sent out to a dispatched call for trespass does not mean that you're automatically going to jail. You can be issued a misdemeanor summons. You can be verbally warned to vacate the private property. So there are it's not an automatic you go to jail.
All right. And we are seeing the increase in the unhoused across the community. Number 10, this is really funding for the Public Defender's Office. So the establishment went through last year through the Board of Indigent Services. So this is really an appropriation support request to make sure that that board has sufficient resources to be able to stand up the Public Defender's Office. That's the sort of the next and final piece to that standing up.
I just want to be clear. So that's an appropriation, right?
It is.
At this point?
Yes. Yep.
And
We're
you're
trying to, on this document and on the right side, to say whether it's appropriation or legislation. Number 11, also an appropriation, and this is around funding for communities like KCK that was to establish violence interrupter or cure violence kind of programs using evidence-based approaches. So this is also a new one, and looking at how we, both at local government, but also can partner with the state to reduce violence within the community. Number 12, this extreme risk protection order. So this is one that's been enacted in 19 states, and it's really, a tool to allow law enforcement to take a firearm from an individual that is deemed at extreme risk, either to themselves or to others, and provides that kind of due process protections for to make sure that that's done fairly and in a way that people can get firearms back. So this is again one that's been recommended here. All right. Number 13, this is the last of the priority ones, alternative revenue sources. So I know the commission has had a good bit of discussion on this through the budget process in this year. And so, part of this is allowing cities to identify and use alternative revenue sources that best suit that individual community, so that Wyandotte County and KCK and the cities within Wyandotte County can make those choices around revenue sources that best suit that community. If there's any commissioners that want to say anything on that. Right, right.
I think, definitely we're all familiar in Kansas City about a local earnings tax. And I think that has been introduced before. That has come up at our town hall meetings, a request from citizens to consider introducing that, but I don't really know the history of what has happened. I know it hasn't been successful in the past. So anyways, and then, I also think perhaps another thing is that, statutorily, we should be funding ad valorem tax. So like that would help, as far as revenue funding sources, we should be funding the revenue funding sources that are there now that we aren't funding, that would go to help our cities and counties with property tax reduction particularly. So I would say that would be an item I would think that you would want to advocate for is just funding the revenue source that's already supposed to be coming to you.
Well, and that's not the only thing that over the years, the
Yes.
state has removed from local government control, machinery and equipment. And
Yep.
you can probably speak to this much more eloquently than I can, but you're absolutely right. And what I don't know, and we should probably find out if we don't know in this room, is, for example, on an earnings tax, I just cannot remember if locally, have we asked that question in our community survey, and what was the answer? Because it would be helpful for us to know if we were going to try to work towards something like that, what's the community input on that? And but yeah, all of that I think could have been super helpful just this past year in trying to balance this budget that we just went through. So, Commissioner.
I mean, I was here when this commission supported an earnings tax, but I'm going to say, I don't think it has any legs in the legislature. And I mean, everybody who's campaigning, every one of you, what do you hear people complain about the most? Taxes. So talking about earnings taxes. But I don't know from your surveys either, what the results is.
The only thing we've asked on- sorry, I'm
Go ahead,
gonna
go ahead.
ask
No,
the
go
survey
ahead.
question. The only thing we've asked in the survey specifically about is the parks related tax. That's the only tax.
I just wanted to echo Senator Petty on the taxes, property taxes. I'm sure that you all are getting the emails like I'm getting and the texts and people that are receiving their bills now, and how shocked they are at how high they are, and reducing that tax is, in my opinion, very important.
And if I may, I want to talk about the ad valorem. I think the governor last session or the session before last introduced $49 million to be reimbursed to local governments. Over the last 10 years, they've taken $2 billion away from local governments in ad valorem taxes. But that was to start that payment back. And we've continued to kick that down the road. In reference to the sales tax, any tax issue in this community is going to be met with scrutiny. But I would just state, remember, the approval of the legislature is important on that. And our members to the south now have the largest voting block within the caucus. So I would just share with you that if even our community even wanted it, it would be a difficult lift when those that come in to work in our community choose to go back. They don't want to have to pay that additional tax. So I think we've all dealt with that, but that's how it works through the legislative process. So I'm going to miss working with you all on that one.
Might mention one item that's a little bit farther down the list, but Commissioner Bynum and I had a discussion about the sports wagering bill that passed the legislature last year, and the revenue from that does not function or equate like the gaming revenues do from the casinos where there's a local share. As you might recall, the vast majority of that money is going into a quote professional sports fund that is aimed to maybe lure a certain professional team to come to Kansas. But I think It's fair to say that there was a lot of consternation about that provision in the legislature. And so I've certainly heard some discussion about how that may be revisited. And if it is revisited, there's an opportunity for those local units of government, I think, to make its case to the legislature that those funds ought to equate to how regular gaming funds work with regard to the local portion.
And I'll add that the ad valorem tax is an item in the LAKM agenda, which is one of the reasons it's not in ours, but recognize that it's an important one. All right, moving along here. Number 14, prevailing rate wage. This was in the 2022 agenda, and it's prevailing wage on public works projects and economic development projects where tax incentives are given.
Commissioner Kane.
Oh, thank you. Wow, we have guests and people watching on TV, Craig, so I can't say what I really want to say. But I will say this, prevailing wage in my mind needs to be in the top 10. And it stripped us of people working here that live here, where they now have to go on the road to perform the function. Then they bring people in from Minnesota and Texas to perform the job at half the price or less, with no benefits, no insurance, no nothing. So in my mind, that needs to be in the top 10. And trust me, the governor has heard me more than once, and she will hear me again. And I do want to comment on the food sales tax. The first thing when I talked to the governor-elect, when she was first got elected but not sworn in, I talked about prevailing wage, workman's comp. Then I switched to being a commissioner, and I said the elimination of the food sales tax, because it hurt Wyandotte County. And now that the food is really going up, it's a great time to lower it down.
Ramirez.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. Just second everything Commissioner Kane said. I know a lot of members of our delegation have been continuing over the years to fighting for prevailing wage, even to the point of just for Wyandotte County, not even the state, just Wyandotte County. So I would agree that that should be at the top of our at the top of our list, because it would greatly benefit our community. And it's I thank you to all of those who have continued to fight for it and to try and bring it back to Wyandotte County.
I would say we really need help on educating legislators on some of these issues. So now we have a whole new crop of new people. And for years, I've tried to do prevailing wage. And now I have a whole new crop of people. I have to go back and go through it again. And if you don't lay that groundwork, if you don't educate them, then it's real easy. It comes up on the floor. I get an opportunity, offer an amendment, and then the Kansas Chamber sends out a email blast, vote no. So it has been killed so many times.
Commissioner.
Let me tell you how this chamber worked. We had a pamphlet that UMKC came up with, right? And it said all the reasons why you should do this. The chamber got up there, and Stephanie Clayton was a Republican at the time, House rep, got up there and they said, "Where's your book?" "It's in the truck." She said, "Go get it." So they said, "Well, we'll talk about it the next day." And they never brought it up again. And you're right. And Representative Curtis has worked her tail off on this. A bunch of these folks have worked their tails off on this. But somehow we need to get the message that they wouldn't want them to happen to their families, where their family has to go on the road to work when they're building projects right here. So, and if you remember, a bridge just fell not too long ago. And the quality of work that's done by the unions is inspected. There's skills that they have to learn, the apprenticeship program. There's things that and Commissioner Biden's husband's done it all. The training that you have to go through to prevent this from happening. So then you bring these guys in, and one of the state reps said, you can take 4 people that have never worked construction with one guy that's worked construction and build a safe bridge. And I about passed out, because that's not true. So this is, in my mind, a very large item. And I appreciate the work you've done and the work you're gonna do. I'm looking at our two new representatives.
Veterans.
Thank you in advance before me talking to you.
With prevailing wage, maybe it's a time has come when we particularly talk about salaries and having a workforce being able to provide quality jobs and a workforce for from local employees. So I think that's another, and businesses now, just like childcare, are embracing some of these issues. I'm not so sure about prevailing wage yet, but I think we have the economy in our favor when it comes to prevailing wage as well.
I apologize. I meant to say that the new 3 House reps.
All right, number 15, community college funding. It's related actually back to the property tax as well, which is, increased state funding for the community college system, decreases the pressure on property tax funding as the mechanism for community college funding. So that's where this item emerged from. Number 16, this was on the 2022 agenda, and this is enactment of a comprehensive tourism plan, and recognizing that it's such a critical part of the local economy in Wyandotte County. Number 17, also on our previous 2022 agenda around STAR bonds and ensuring that STAR bonds continue to be a viable economic development tool.
Could I just stop there for a minute? Could I have you help me make sure I understand the current state of affairs with STAR bonds? Because I honestly don't know. Who wants to help?
Actually,
Go ahead.
Tom can say where we're at in details. He probably can recall that more. But again, when we modify STAR bonds and we offer to our rural communities a threshold of $3 million, we should have also included the economically distressed urban areas. And I'm okay even if we tie to that, like also has some connection to a historical site. Because again, to me, our most historic sites in Kansas, the Quindaro ruins and Call Point, and then you can even include the Zeller Bridge, which connected our 2 states, over to the stockyards. But those are our historic sites. And it seems to me like they're perfect STAR bondable projects, and they're in economically distressed areas, and they can be transformative. So again, every time we see that rural thing, let's put in that economically distressed urban areas. So, and Tom, I think it's a much higher threshold now for 75.
Now 75 million. It was 50 million to begin with. And there's only, that state ceiling is 50% participation. And now there's also been more transparency and more scrutiny that those that do the auditing can be picked by the Lieutenant Governor's Office, Department of Commerce, so that a feasibility study in the past that might have been ordered by a local government through a firm, now the Secretary of Commerce and or the Lieutenant Governor makes that selection as to who will do the feasibility study to ensure the numbers are a little more accurate and transparent. So it's STAR bonds was changed to raise the threshold. 50% is the threshold they want to keep participation at, but I really believe that the lower you can keep the state's participation and local government's participation, the better the project, because there's more. There were some concerns about what they called false equity. If they took down a bunch of property for $100,000, and once they take it down and it's now going to be part of a STAR bonds project, the value of that property jumps up to 50 million. And that false equity then went to the developer, and then the state's portion came in, and if the numbers didn't work out, it's not that the communities are on tab for those STAR bonds, but the state's money has to go to retire that debt. And so there was been concerns over the years. I will state this, that we've been very fortunate in Wyandotte County that we are held up as an example of how to work it and work it correctly versus other areas across the state. So that's why the changes have come forward with STAR bonds. But again, it's the best economic development tool in the nation as an incentive.
So, Commissioner, 75 million minimum value input for it to qualify. And then you're saying no more than 50% participation at state or local level for public funding.
Right.
And is there a time frame when you all have updated star bond legislation? Is there a sunset on that, or is it just until you make a change again?
No, anytime you make a change to a Star Bonds project, it's got to go back through the analysis again, the feasibility study. The sunset on the bill is, I can't remember if we settled on 3 or 5, but is it 5? We settled on 5 years from the close of the legislation. It might have been in putting into the register. So from that time, it'd be 5 years. But under the original Star Bonds legislation that we utilized to develop Village West, I did put a very short window that if you didn't break ground within the first 18 months, you lost all opportunities to utilize Star Bonds because we were the first project out. As a matter of fact, the DeSoto site where the Panasonic is now going was the original site for a Star Bonds project, which would have been the Land of Oz that was brought forward by a senator. I think it was Senator Ben Vidrickson, as a matter of fact. And we cobbed onto that to keep the NASCAR from moving to Kansas City, Missouri. And in addition to that, not only did we pass the Star Bond legislation and put the Speedway in it, but we also, at the local units of government had just changed from 10-year tax abatement to 20 years. And then when the Speedway came forward, they wanted the full 20 years and they'd only been on the books less than 6 months. And then the Speedway came back and said they wanted 30 years. And so we had to carve a special piece out to ensure that all the development around the Speedway wasn't given away to a 30-year tax abatement. That's when I carried amendment on the floor to develop the Legends area, which allowed local investors the opportunity to develop that area. So Star Bonds has a lot of different triggers, Commissioner, and I appreciate you. But it's an important tool that's been very good to Wyandotte County.
And I think therefore it has to stay in the forefront of our agenda. Maybe not sitting at 17, but maybe a little higher. Okay, sorry. Keep moving.
Could I jump ahead? I'm actually sorry I have to leave, but I wanted to mention your number 32, which is the Youth Fatality Review Board. You actually, that was a priority on your agenda, in the UG's agenda in the past. And of course, we were successful at getting a local Youth Fatality Review Board, and then the state Child Youth Fatality Review Board raised some angst about security of local boards. So that is in the works. So I would encourage commission to look at putting that higher up than number 31, sorry.
Welcome, Senator Haley.
Senator Petty, just to clarify, so there are additional legislative fixes around the Youth Fatality Review Board? Or is it
Yeah, I mean,
kind of working through the administrative process?
I've actually been working on this for 2 years
I know.
with you guys. And I know that there is, well, I'm hopeful that this is still in conversation of what has to be done for that to, we are the only sit at the county Atlanta. We're the only one that has has a youth fatality review board. And so there's reasons why you want to have it. And I think that you should continue to work for having it back in place, because the state youth fatality review board has raised some objections. Well, they say that the membership is not as secure in their information. And so that's been one of the issues. Paul might have some more information there.
we did get a bill that was, we worked, Senator Petty and folks at the Health Department worked on a bill that I believe Representative Burrows got introduced near the end of the session. We just didn't have time to be able to work the bill, but I think the legislation is there and ready to go. And so we can just get on the process earlier and hopefully get it through this time.
Okay. We'll jump back here to our last one in our economic development, which is number 18, which is Riverfront Authority. This is a new item for this year, and this is kind of emergent from all the activity that's taking place around the river and the desire to utilize the river as an economic development and recreational asset. So this would be looking at, what is the structure? Is there a structure that would help to facilitate and accelerate that development? Right, we got two under local government operations. Alternate construction delivery. So this was in last year's agenda and there was some movement on it. But as I understand it, and Mr. Fisher is here if there are specific questions, that the threshold is not sufficient to allow local governments to really access that tool for design, build, construction manager at risk. So that's why it remains in the agenda for this year. Okay. And then number 20, energy efficiency and development of a statewide energy policy. This was a carryover from last year's agenda as well, to allow local governments to act individually or in cooperation with others on energy.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. So yes, support all of this. And in just general, I'd remiss if I didn't state for our delegation to continue to advocate and protect local control. Since we're under the heading of local government operations, protect our local control and be able to take care of our own affairs without state interference. So I just ask that the delegation to keep advocating and keep fighting for our local control.
Okay. Public health and human services. So we got a number in this area. Number 21 is an appropriation request around increased investment in public health funding. And as you can see in the description there, that the state of Kansas doesn't invest a lot compared to other states. And certainly we have seen the benefit of that investment when it's made in our local health department and its ability to respond and address local health needs.
That's a big one for me. I mean, obviously everything we've been through. And our local health department has done so much. I won't say with so little because it's an expensive proposition, but just we've got to keep, I think we've all come to understand, the value of a local public health department, sadly, more so than we probably ever understood before. And so now we do understand, and just anything at all that can be done to support local public health. Yeah, Commissioner, did you have something?
Thank you. Just to add on that, and I always tell our health department, and this is not a knock against them, but it's a department that's kind of in the back burner. That's just in the back working, doing their job for the community. That's never really upfront. We hear about our economic development, we hear about our planning, our budget, our finance, but not so much our public health department. But during COVID, during the pandemic, they were the forefront of operations. They were ones taking care of everything, controlling all of this. And our health department was a, I lost the word, was a was the best in my mind and the best that we've in our state. That was able to work with us, work with the community and do what was best for our community. They based it on the science and not the politics of the issues. So I completely agree and second everything that Commissioner Bynum said. You know, this is something we need our health department. They need the resources. They need to provide. Wyandotte County is still one of the unhealthiest communities in our state. Our health department needs the resources they need to help us get out of that ranking.
All right, number 22, expedited partner therapy. This is a carryover from last year, and this is legislation that would allow for automatically giving prescription therapy to a partner in a sexually transmitted disease instance to reduce the spread of that. Number 20.
I might just add to that bill has passed the House before. But there is, I think, one senator in particular who has been an impediment to that, but just wanted to point that out. Not you.
Oh. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, number 23. This is also a carry forward. This is the removal of active consent for school surveys to allow for a better survey pool that allows for the health departments to make better decisions. Number 24, this is funding for senior populations. So this is really an appropriation request that comes through our area agency on aging. That we have full funding for home and community-based services and really increasing funding to support some of our most vulnerable populations. Likewise, number 25 is an appropriation request, and this is around restoration of state funds for nutrition services for older Kansans and caregivers. And this is another funding area that has kind of sat stagnant for a long time. And the Area Agency on Aging sees the effect of that in their service delivery to the community as well.
So 25 is specifically to older adult population?
It is, yes. Yep. Number 26, fentanyl testing strip legalization. This is a harm reduction strategy related to the opioid epidemic, which is to allow, and it goes perhaps a little bit with drug paraphernalia one that we saw earlier, allowing for fentanyl testing strips so that people can test whether there's fentanyl in drugs that they're consuming, and to prevent what has become a more common occurrence where people don't know that it's there, they ingest drugs, and they have an overdose. And so it can be this is another one of those harm reduction strategies.
We actually had an amendment and had that one introduced on the House floor, but it didn't quite garner. So it's going to need some, again, like some of these issues, they need some, just hardcore education with legislators so that they understand them better when they come forward like that. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to get them over the finish line.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, to the fentanyl issue. And thank you for those whom I haven't met. I'm David Haley from the 4th Senate District. Ironically, I'm coming from Topeka on the Sentencing Commission, which I said, pardon me for again being delayed. But one of the issues is how we balance the crime meeting the time and paraphernalia in and of itself, and what constitutes drug paraphernalia and the use of certain substances. It's a major issue that really causes great disparity between Kansas and now actually Missouri. When we look at other issues for substance possession and how they'll be changing in Missouri, among others, we're trying to get a grasp of how we bring balance to it. And as Representative Curtis just stated, it made it through. The fentanyl on the strips made it through the House, got over to the Senate, and in conference committee, it was confused. The educational curve, I think, will be in place easily enough to get this through, probably at the beginning. Hopefully, it was just a glitch toward the end as to whether or not this was a greater enabling of what is an epidemic in our country and indeed our state regarding the use and possession of fentanyl. So I think a little better understanding will be in place and we'll be able to get this legislation through and check it off our list rapidly. Thank you.
Okay. Number 27, in a similar vein, this is a Good Samaritan overdose law. And this is, again, if encouraging people who find themselves in a situation where someone they're with overdoses, that they feel like they can call 911 without fear, then they will be arrested when somebody shows up. So we want people to call, we want people to get help, and we don't want them to not do that because of fear of prosecution. Number 28, this is from our health department and our human services department, and this is source of income non-discrimination policies. And what this is related to is recognizing that there are up to 400 vouchers estimated in Wyandotte County that go, housing vouchers that go unused in a given year because landlords don't accept those. And so this would codify that those are required to be accepted. So.
Commissioner Ramirez.
Thank you, Madam Pro Tem. This is something that I believe I had a conversation with Commissioner Bynum probably a year or two ago about this. And this was something that I believe I've talked to our legal department about too in the past, of something for Wyandotte County to pass as ourselves as an ordinance. I believe this is something that just because of where your income comes from should not be a detriment for housing. If you can check all the boxes that you have good rental record, if you have no bad marks against you, but just because of where your income comes from, that it's not from a job, it may be from alimony, it may be from federal purposes, if disability, Social Security, that I believe a landlord shouldn't say no to you just because of where the money comes from. And so I am very firm believer and support this as something that we should continue to fight for.
Mr. House, I'd like to derail the rest of the bullet points and make sure that I say to my fellow commissioners that if there's an item 39 through whatever, 35 through 39 or whatever number we're on, 29 through 39. And I'm going to do it quick because the mayor's coming back. Make sure we bring that up. But what I want to just make sure we get on the table for this room is what this community needs desperately is your help and support with every single possible infrastructure dollar that can come to Wyandotte County, period. And it really sits at the top of all of this for me. And there are funds from almost every federal department of government, many of which are being funneled through the state, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of those dollars are going from fed to state to local. And several of us have sat in conversations with the Secretary of Transportation, and which is a real learning experience, I will add, to learn things about how many bridges there are in the state. And I think we are, through the mayor's efforts and these partnerships that we're creating and some of these large grants that we're writing, we're actually making some headway. But by golly, if there's anything at all that needs more attention than that, I really don't know what it is. So I'm just asking, please, whatever support you can bring. So I'll stop there, but I sure didn't want to leave our time together without putting that on the table, because I really think it's one of the largest things that confronts us as a local government. So I'll stop talking for a moment. Mayor, here's your I took advantage of you being out of the room.
And Commissioner Bynum, I would just echo that. I mean, I've spoke to many of you, you know, infrastructure is at the top of my list because in downtown KCK, we are getting choked off. Like we are getting choked off. You can't get around the town. And we desperately need some attention on infrastructure. And I've been engaged in some of those conversations. A lot of those federal dollars that are flowing for infrastructure are federal dollars that we have to apply for. And that is why KDOT through Secretary Lorenz, they set up that infrastructure hub, and she has been very clear, do not wait for us. Like if there's a program, a bridge replacement program that will fix the Central Avenue Bridge and get it reopened, please apply for those funds. So we've got to be aggressive about
And
that.
I won't speak for our public works director. He's in the room. You know, there's no way he's not looking at that hub, but I'm speaking from a policy making place. But I do know that for Kansas Avenue specifically, we've got the mega grant in process and it's a big one. And we need it for Central and we need it for all those other locations, but infrastructure in general. It's the thing that makes your city, period. So anyway, I'll stop.
Yes, let's go out for every dollar we can. Let me just point out the obvious. If we don't choose to spend the proactive money for the ongoing maintenance of those assets, we will be in this exact same place somewhere down the road. So yeah, let's go get everything we can right now. Let's fix everything we can. We around this table need to make the commitment to proactively funding the maintenance on an ongoing basis, or else it's fool's gold. Thank you.
I can add one comment to that. Maybe, I know we have some new legislators. A significant thing did happen this past year in that the so-called Bank of KDOT was closed, which means no longer is money being diverted away from transportation projects to fund general government obligations. And at 10 years ago, there was a absolutely huge amount of money that was going away from transportation, lots of projects that never came to fruition. And I think we just have to be mindful of not going back to where we were at. I mean, keep the door shut to the Bank of KDOT so that those projects, which are, we also have a rolling program, which means that you can be constantly applying for new dollars that are coming on down the road, which is really a great thing for communities like ours that desperately need those.
All right. I'm going to kind of move quickly here. I'm going to kind of jump through 29 and 30. If you have questions on those, their description is here. I think those are pretty self-explanatory. And we've talked about 31, Youth Fidelity Review Board. Medical cannabis is number 32. This was a carry forward from the agenda last year. Just wanted to make sure there was a little bit of time since that space continues to shift as we saw what happened in Missouri. So if there's discussion amongst the commission, the delegation on cannabis, just wanted to make sure we had a little bit of time for that.
I appreciate this issue very much as we look at the changing regional perspective, especially on not only medicinal, but also legalization of cannabis, marijuana in and of itself. I am concerned as to what the response might be here among the commission, across the street with our district attorney, in terms of those who find themselves in possession of small amounts of cannabis, especially where that's been obtained legally. May even be taxed right across the river, just a mile or so away from here. So I appreciate any insight, any support that this commission might give as we continue to debate it. The state has a commission. I don't know if any of our members sit on the interim committee. There's an interim committee studying that they may speak to so that we can get a policy in place that just has us not be the odd person out and having, or asking law enforcement to do their job to enforce a law that no one else has on its books. That is those that possess small amounts of marijuana, and that being the only crime. As we know, the federal action has been taken already. And so I just hope we would have some continuity and clarity in the policy for KCK, for Wyandotte County, and ultimately the state of Kansas in this.
To hit on that question, Senator, and thank you. I think some of you, our commissioners, have been at the table. I know our legal team, our chief, the DA. We've had that discussion because we are sandwiched between two states that now have legalized marijuana. I saw that coming. And so as a result of that, we've had that conversation. The initial conversation was how to depenalize, similar to what Wichita has done. The recommendation from the committee that was put together from our judges and others that were involved in the meeting was to look at education, prevention, and treatment. And the reason for that is because even though we're looking at making the first time you're in possession of small amounts of marijuana not as punitive, the problem is after three, your third possession, it's a felony. And so our DA and the others were really concerned that if we depenalize it, we're giving people maybe a bridge to ultimately getting a felony, because even though we may not be as hard on people in small amounts here in Wyandotte County, good luck taking your chances in other counties. It may not be as lenient in that regard when you talk about other people that might look and review cases of small amounts of possession. So I would ask, I believe that that maybe legalization, I don't know where I know you all are having the discussion with recreational, but I think to go in concept with it is maybe look at not making small amounts of marijuana after a third strike a felony. I mean, it has an adverse impact on communities, especially communities of color, historically, if you look at the data. And so I think that's something is maybe a minor compromise that maybe could be had short of full legalization of marijuana in the state of Kansas as we start to move towards that process and that debate at the state level on what reflects the values of Kansas. And so that's kind of an ask that I would like to consider. I just a felony for being in possession of marijuana where it's illegal in 2 neighboring states. I think that just needs a second look.
I'm going to take a different approach here. I think at, the local level, yes and amen. I think at the state level, I'm for full legalization. I just do not see the point, especially in the Kansas City metro area, where for many folks, it really does not matter if they're in Kansas or Missouri. I think without advocating for full legalization, we put our residents in a very compromising position where they're going to have to look and see whether or not they cross state line. I think we're missing out on incredible business opportunities for folks to really change their lives. And within the full legalization would include all of the things that come with, medicinal use and more commercial use. I understand I may be in the minority here, and that is perfectly okay with me, but I think we are going to see it happen. It's not a question of if, it is a question of when, and we saw that happen on election day where about half the country is already there now. Thank you.
Just to add to, and I appreciate this discussion, I'll be brief. So I know we're here to get direction from the commission for which way you go. I'll pose a similar ask that the policy that you both have articulated, both you, Mayor Garner, and you, Commissioner Davis, might be shared with our law enforcement and indeed our prosecutorial arm. We don't have to, or you don't have to prosecute, arrest, detain certain amounts. That's a policy that can be made at a local level. As we push to get policies changed at the state level, there are counties that opt out. I was personally a bit concerned during the discussion with Missouri, when the district's attorneys of both our county and Johnson were looking at what the initiative might be in Missouri and how it would affect or not affect the policies that we have here at home. I would hope that this commission might consider the adverse impact and over enforcement of our existing possession law regarding marijuana would have on our populations here, were our law enforcement to be overly burdened by having to detain, by having to arrest and then have potentially prosecuted those small possession amounts, especially when they're coming from neighboring counties, and that this commission might share with your departments, both the police and the prosecutorial arm, how we are a little bit concerned about how our jails and our system will be clogged if they overly enforce these marijuana possession penalties as we strive to bring changes about in Topeka.
All right, I'm going to keep pushing through here. We're close to the end. Number 33, this is a new one. This assault on public transit employees. This is something that was seen nationwide as well in terms of increased assault. So this would actually make that a felony versus what it is today. Number 34, this is expanding child in need of care support services. This is an appropriation request to provide additional cognitive behavior counseling for youth. And this is also one of those upstream efforts to prevent youth from getting into the criminal justice system and to put them on a better path. So that's what that one's about. Tax and finance, we've got motor vehicle taxes. This is a carryover and equalization of that formula so that the same make and model in Wyandotte County is taxed at the same rate as make and model in any other county in Kansas, which is not currently the rate, how it works. Golden Years property tax. This was also on last year's agenda. And this is a property tax relief program for seniors.
I believe there was a bill in the Senate and Senator Haley, I think it was Senator Holland's bill, if I remember correctly, that identified, was it age 65 or 72? I don't recall the age, but it would have an impact on local governments. But I think there was criteria in there for the state to make up that portion. I can't recall. I know it got hung up in the Senate. So
I thought there was some provision that did pass, something that has cleared that will be implemented. I'm not sure it should be of all the provisions, but I think it's in the 60s, 60.
It's 65. Yes.
And of course, primary residential. But I don't know what impact, but there is some piece of that, at least it was advanced, it has cleared.
Somehow I thought that it didn't impact local, that the state was funding the rebate or what have you.
that's what I can't recall how it came out of committee, the conference committee report. I just remember that there was argument over if they raised it to 72, would it lower the cost to the state? And that's why it went through the tax conference committee report, which I'm not one of. But I will state that is a very important remedy to the rising cost of property tax, particularly for seniors. It freezes their property tax at whatever it is from 65 or the age that they agreed upon moving forward.
But Mr. Davis, can you get something to us? Because there's probably a window, like the way the homestead and utility rebates has a window for application. So I feel like we need this information ASAP so that we can push this out.
I found it. I actually had forwarded it to Commissioner Davis. So it's the Golden Years Homestead Property Tax Freeze Program. It's a bill that passed this year that would establish a new property tax circuit breaker refund program that has a maximum refund of $2,500 on property taxes paid. To qualify, the taxpayer must be 65 years of age or older, a disabled veteran, have a household income of less than $50,000, own a qualifying residential homestead property less than 350,000 in value and not be claiming the existing homestead property tax refund.
So can you send that to us? Because that's
can.
a lot of.
Question I have is I don't know how people access this. Like I talked about it, but I don't know, like, how do you get that?
My point is, those other rebate programs
Yes.
open January 1 and end in March or April. So we need to know
know
how this
How
operates
it works.
right now. Yeah.
I will try my best to try it. And I don't know, does anybody have, do you?
So
Paul, have any
I will
idea, or
just,
anybody else?
whoa, that's like super
Oh,
loud. Sorry.
sorry.
Sorry, Becky Berger, interim assistant county administrator. Monica has actually been doing a lot to make sure that this program gets distributed throughout the county. So I would love for her to have an opportunity to kind of talk about what she's doing.
Okay, well, I wasn't quite prepared for that, but I'll just give a brief information. This year, the clerk's office, of course, is responsible to administer these programs on behalf of the UG and the state. We are creating a scenario where we will actually be going out into the county during the time that these application periods are open. And that will be from the first working day in January through March 31st. We will be working out in the community to process these applications for qualified individuals. So any information, we do have a training session with the state coming up on December 16th that will give us more information about these two new programs, which is the Golden Years and the Disabled Veterans Program. So we'll know more then. Our other two programs are Homestead Safe Senior and our utility sales tax. We are prepared to go now. So as soon as we get that, we will provide more information to all of you.
And thanks, Monica. And the mayor's office will be working with that to help facilitate that with the clerk's office. And part of that is that we're going to be reaching out to the commissioners that are districts that are impacted to make sure that you all are directly involved too, because we really need you all at the table as well. And other opportunities as well, as far as things that the unified government may offer, as well as other benefits. We're looking at what those are so we can have kind of a resource center type event as we go around the four corners of Wyandotte County. Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that information, Representative Curtis. I talked about this at my town hall along with other provisions that have been passed through the state so that, you know, Wyandotte Countyans can access tax relief. Those particular, I don't want to say they're restrictive, but it is very specific on who this applies to. And if there's any appetite with your colleagues with these upcoming sessions to expand who that applies to, that would be phenomenal, particularly the income restriction. That's a lot of the feedback that I got is, hey, I make a little bit more, just enough. It's always like this anytime there's an income restriction. But I know that would be super beneficial, but thank you all. It's been very helpful.
All right, our last two items here, impact fees and exactions. This is related to development and allowing for impact fees to, again, help to fund infrastructure and other community needs. Number 38, e-commerce delivery fee. And this is, again, related to the shift in the economy to a delivery-based economy in a lot of ways. And so that's adding a lot of vehicle miles to the roads. And so this is another kind of revenue source, as we're talking about alternative revenue sources that could come into play to help fund infrastructure and road maintenance. And then number 39, sports betting revenue. We believe we covered that earlier. So I think that's.
You're not asking for much.
Right. So that's kind of that list. We can survey the commission to kind of help identify what those priorities are. You know, or if there are things, we heard a couple of things that maybe we should want to add. I didn't really hear a lot of take off or, you know, deprioritize. So we'll kind of figure out through that process what those priorities could look like. Mayor, I'll turn it back.
Yep. Thank you. Commissioner Ramirez, that question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. just as always, continued support to fully funding our education, and specifically special education. I work with special education, I work with students who have dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia. And it's something very special and near to my heart. So it's asking our delegation and just on both chambers to fight to fully fund not education, but special education, because that's a part of education that doesn't get much praise for especially those staff and those teachers who work, and for those students who need the help, who need those resources and that support. And so that's something near to my heart to ask us continue to fight for that and for that full funding.
Representative Wynn?
If I may, I just sat through an entire day on that discussion. And so I'll say the unfortunate aspect is that there will be attempts to change the definitions or add definitions in the state statute that currently exist. And that, you always, if you don't like something, you do a little voodoo math. And so there's a little voodoo math going on, but it will be a full-blown discussion. So please, when we do have hearings, come and participate, and real examples of the excess cost that's not being covered, and that it impacts all students. And of course, gifted are considered special ed. So there's a lot of students that potentially, whatever that decision, however that decision comes out, it's going to impact. So please stay involved.
Thank you. I believe we had some representatives show up. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've had the opportunity to introduce yourself.
Melissa.
Hello, I'm Dr. Melissa Orpeza, and I am the new elect representative for District 37. And I'm excited to be here and we'll enjoy serving next year.
Thank you and congratulations to you.
Yeah.
We also have Senator Haley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm David Haley. I'm honored to continue representing the 4th District, which is wholly contained in Wyandotte County, the only Senate district that is. And just pleased to be a part of this continuum of discussion, this august body, and our new representatives that are going on board. I'm on the judiciary, the ranking member for our Senate Judiciary Committee, and also on public health and welfare in the Senate on those committees. And pleased to have this ongoing dialogue. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commission, and thank you, Mr. Davis, for helping this come together. United we stand.
Thank you, Senator. And not with us today was Representative Robinson, who's replacing Representative Henderson. He's newly elected to this position, so we're also looking forward to having a positive relationship with him as well. So we've gone a little over our time today. So just in the interest of our staff needing to be able to set up the IT function for the full commission meeting, we're going to push this back to 7:20, where we have our full commission meeting. I apologize to the public on that, but they do need time to get transition from special session to full commission meeting. And so at this time, I'll adjourn the special session. Do I have a motion and a second to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
I have a motion and a second. Clerk, roll call, please.
Roll call, Stites. Davis.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Ramirez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Kane. Markley.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned and we will reconvene at 7:20 in the commission chambers for our regular meeting.